Atlus as a company has a reach spanning so wide that it's no shock some of their games go unsung and untranslated. But today, we'll be going a little bit deeper into the belly of the beast to find a game that's just tangentially related to Shin Megami Tensei. A little known fact is that Atlus didn't develop the original SMT alone. They had the help of a small game development company called... Okay, and listen guys, I'm so white and ignorant I can barely pronounce avocado, so don't make fun of me here. Deno Aizo Seisakusho, and it's this company that we'll be talking about today. After working on SMT, their next game wouldn't be released until 1998 for the PS1 as Dark Messiah in Japan and Hell Knight in the US. While it wasn't a commercial success, modern gamers have revisited it and praised the unique setting and compelling narrative. It's also the only game by them that was officially released for English speakers. The next game they released was for something called the Neo Geo Pocket Color, and its name is... Oh, nice try Japan, but I plan on getting hired in the future. Honestly, the game looks super cute, and there's even an English fan translation. As of writing, I haven't looked into the game too much, but it seems to be a rudimentary dungeon crawler with turn-based combat. The art style is super charming, and honestly, it kind of gives off amateur RPG Maker vibes. It also stars a bunch of cute characters like Momo, Garanpa, Maki, and... Oh my god, is this a FNAF reference? Anyway, their final game and the topic of today's video is DeSpiria, released for the Dreamcast. But shortly after its release, DES would shut down, leaving their final game without an official or fan translation. Now, you may be wondering, how am I going to talk about DeSpiria if it never got translated to English? That brings us to star of the show, God bless their name, Popo Moko, aka Rio. While DeSpiria has never received a playable fan translation, Rio was passionate enough to play through the whole game in Japanese and translate it to English for our viewing pleasure. The gameplay VODs have no commentary, and Rio translates each line with YouTube subtitles, sometimes adding in a bit of context or explaining the way that they translated. The gameplay footage shown, as well as my current understanding of the game, is all courtesy of their hard work, so truly, thank you so much, Rio. This video would be entirely impossible without you. And the craziest thing about this is that neither Japanese nor English is their first language. Like, that is some serious talent. If you'd like to watch Rio's videos, I would strongly recommend it. DeSpiria's story is honestly masterfully told in a way that makes it a little bit difficult to recite in a video without taking away a lot of the magic that the game has to offer. See, DeSpiria has you blindly explore an area that's filled with interactable NPCs and things to look at. Because of this, important story points are often interspersed with strange and unrelated events, meaning it's totally possible that I mistell some things or miss something entirely. So if you notice anything wrong with my plot summary, please feel free to say so. Also, I don't want to take away from Rio's videos, so I'm purposely leaving out quite a bit, specifically side content and some of the wacky characters. DeSpiria's story can be hard to follow, so this video is meant to act as an answer to what did I just witness? So, editing Isaac here, live update. Rio announced on their channel that they are working on a playable translation for DeSpiria. So if anyone's interested in helping with programming or translation, obviously reach out, see if there's anything you can do to help. And yeah, that's really exciting, and I hope this video ages poorly. Before I start getting into spoilers, I'll set up the world of DeSpiria as well as the first chapter so that you can see if it's something you want to watch or play for yourself. The year is 2070, and 22 years have passed since worldwide nuclear disaster called by World War III. We play as Allure Valentine, a young girl with telepathic abilities who works for a religious/government organization that recently seized power called the Church, officially named Curia. The entire game takes place in Japan, specifically the Osaka Prefecture, which has now been loosely separated into a few sectors. Central, which is an area mostly under Church control. South, where the Church has significantly less control. A place called New Tokyo, which is considered to be full of irredeemable, amoral people. And finally, a heretical land condemned by the Church that is centered around modern-day Osaka. Before things get going, let me explain Allure's abilities. She's what's called a mind user. Minds are these weird little creatures that everyone in this world possesses. Oh my god. It's sort of like... Cue the laugh track. I said cue the laugh track. Those capable of using minds to their full potential can dive, meaning that they can read someone's thoughts or the thoughts left behind on an item. Additionally, mind users can initiate mind battles, which seem to happen instantly from an outside view, and have the potential to shatter one's consciousness, rendering them catatonic. Finally, mind users can essentially steal a memory from a person they're diving into through a process called memory eating. Because of all this, mind users are feared quite a bit by the public, but their ability to gather information undetected makes them a valuable tool for the church as they hunt down heretics, those who would threaten the order brought by the church. Allure works as one of these agents, a handmaiden, and has been sent on a hunt for a high-profile heretic. While at first it seemed to be a simple mission, an explosion on the train rails has complicated things quite a bit, and now Allure must try to survive with her fellow passengers as they seek a way out of the ruined railway. Like I said, I'm purposely going to leave out a lot of the world building and wacky characters, so that even if you don't watch Rio's videos spoiler-free, you can still get plenty out of them. Also, since I kinda clickbaited your ass, I'll go into how this game is like SMT. A fun little game mechanic that DeSpiria has is mind fusion, where you can fuse together two minds to get a new one, as well as skill inheritance. Allure is joined in battle by up to 2 minds at a time, which can be customized. There are also sort of races, like in SMT games. In this game it has to do with thoughts of love, hate, and other emotions. Certain emotion-typed minds are better used for support, while others are better used for offense. There's also an elemental system which compounds on the theme of emotion, but when you're just watching gameplay, it's not really something that you keep in mind. There's even fusion accidents that can occur, so you can really see how the game takes a lot from DES's first outing as a game development company. Finally, I want to share something with the class. While DeSpiria, if known at all, is usually known for its super creepy monster designs, there is in fact one piece of this game still floating around in the cultural zeitgeist of my heterosexual hentai enthusiasts. The rather successful animator Lude Frogo uses a track from DeSpiria as their intro. Like, that's crazy. Is this person a fan of niche, untranslated games? I know that it's way more likely that this track is just royalty-free, but I find it absolutely hilarious that there's a possibility someone saw shit like this and decided, yeah, I'm gonna use a song from this game as the intro to my Momo porn animation. That's right, Momo porn. No, not that one, this one. Anyway, this is your last warning before we get into spoiler territory. I'll link Rio's playthrough in the description, as well as a pinned comment. In Chapter 1, Allure has to figure out which passenger is a member of the heretical organization, Shining Bridge, which seeks to undermine the church's authority and potentially abolish it altogether. Yes, I know, here's the Among Us reference. The suspects and remaining survivors from the explosion consist of Raina Sparring, a member of South's powerful Tao family, Fiona Hart, a famous blues singer who is constantly rude to everyone, Violet Merrill, a young woman from New Tokyo who falsely claims to be the daughter of a banker, Chani Marachani, a young girl who is able to earn multiple doctorates at the age of 15, Joe Gibbs, a perverted casino owner from New Tokyo, and Vi Rutherford, an imposing man who worked as an engineer for an android company and enjoys torturing robots. If you're worried that you're not going to be able to remember all these characters, don't worry, most of them die. This chapter sees Allure and the group trying to find their way out of the ruined railway after attempts to contact help failed to show results. Allure awakens in the crashed train and looks around the wreckage, finding an accessory usually used by mind users, suggesting that our target is also a mind user and could already be aware of Allure's mission. Raina enters the room, and when we try to read her mind, she's thinking about death and carnage despite seemingly being super shaken up on the outside. We let her come along with us as we look around. Basically, the way back has been blown up and the overturned train blocks the way forward. Most of this part of the chapter is just us walking around, meeting everyone, and watching Vi brutally torture androids, you know, whatever. We try to call for help from the workers who man the tracks, but oddly enough, they're under attack by crazed androids. Eventually, we can power up an elevator that will lead us closer to the surface, but Raina reveals herself as the agent Allure was looking for, and tries to make a break for it, only to be killed by one of those rampaging robots. Androids in this game are clearly stated to not have the level of consciousness as humans do, but in this case, it seemingly had a rudimentary consciousness despite being a robot, as well as possessing a mind. Well, that's technically mission complete, so I guess now all that's left is finding a way out of here. One half of the group progresses further, while Allure, Chani, and Fiona are left behind. Fiona's been quarantined after allegedly catching a disease, and when we go and check on her, she turns red, okay, and attacks us. Afterwards, Channy reveals that she's also a handmaiden and that she was sent here to investigate Vi, as apparently there was an android uprising where Vi was killed, meaning either this person is an imposter, Among Us reference again, or he faked his death. Vi has been leading the remaining survivors to an abandoned building, which was shut down long ago due to another android uprising, not unlike what we've witnessed here on the tracks. When we investigate this building, we find it's being used to take the consciousness of humans and place them into robots with less than stellar results. We run into Violet, and when we read her mind, she seemingly has two separate consciousnesses in her brain, with the original Violet losing control of her body as the new personality attacks us. After dispatching her, we finally catch up to Vi, who reveals that basically he was feeling a little silly and injected Violet with something and was like, that probably wasn't a good idea, so he blew up the train tracks as a diversion. Kinda crazy that Vi was never like, hey guys, that man injected me with something on the train, and also how did he blow up the train tracks? Were the explosives like preset up there just in case? I don't understand. Anyway, we defeat Vi in a battle where the reticle targets his nipple, and he dies this horrific death that reminds me of Cycling from Dr. Sleep. There's no sign of Joe anywhere, but if we dive into one of these vials on the table, it seems like his consciousness is contained here. Well, that's not our problem, so we leave, and we're finally saved by the rescue team, only to get our skull caved in by a mysteriously revived Violet. In Chapter 2, Allure is beginning to recover from her brain surgery after the attack. We're back in Central, the church's base of operations, and while we're meant to be resting, we quickly receive a message from a man named Archbishop Lowen to receive a new mission. Lowen is a sort of father figure in Allure's life, as well as being the right-hand man to Pope Aldera, the church's leader. Some other important characters are Priest Seth, who taught Allure how to use mind powers properly, and used to be a top-tier investigator before retiring to take care of the church's, okay guys, let's be honest, weed garden. There's also Priest Boys, who is a leader of an anti-mind church faction that thinks the only way to heal the world is to stop using minds entirely, and he is openly hostile to Allure. Speaking with Lowen, we receive a mission to find out what's going on with all the local missing children. We head out and meet up with Toko. She's also a handmaiden and basically second only to Allure. She's in charge of this investigation and tells us that children who have been going missing were literally sleeping right next to their parents, and that lately people have been reporting serious gaps in their memories, suggesting all of this may be the work of a mind user. As we investigate the slums, one of the women tells us about some suspicious priests being in the area, as well as a strange person living in room 201 of a specific apartment complex. As we head over there, we run into Ayla, who's on a similar power level as Toko and also working on the case. It's strange that they assigned the three most powerful maidens in the church to a single case, and suggest that there might be more here than meets the eye. In the apartment complex, we speak to multiple residents. Room 201 was singled out to us specifically, but inside it's just like a little rat in a hood. In another room is a new Tokyo refugee who, what is that? He will tell us about a mysterious cult that sacrifices children to their pagan goddess Carla, and that is something that we should keep in mind, because if we talk to another apartment inhabitant named Durkin, he tells us that there's fully just a room dedicated to the Carla cult. And he also mentions a mysterious resident living in room 206. Well, trying to speak with the person in 206, they tell us, I don't know anything, over and over again. And when we try to dive into them, they're reciting that over and over in their head so that we can't get any information from them. Well, we check out the altar room, which has freshly lit candles, and find that whoever did this recently left behind their matchbook. Scrawled on the matchbook are notes that outline the church's patrol orders, suggesting that someone from inside the church is helping this heretical cult. These matches actually come from this weird lumber house bar hybrid place, and when we go over there to try questioning the barkeep, we run into Priest Seth of all people. He says he's doing his own investigation on the low, but Allure senses something is off about him. He even says he's going to return to the monastery, but if we go back to the garden, he isn't there. Speaking with the barkeep, he tells us about how he rented the room upstairs to a mysterious cloaked figure, and soon after they arrived, the disappearances began happening. Now, for an example of how this game can be a little bit convoluted with progression, here's how we find the culprit. First, we go into the room rented, where we read the residual thoughts that mentions a key stored in a crate at the bazaar. Then we go get the key. Just kidding, first we have to use our mind powers to manipulate this guy so that we can look through the box. Now that we have the key, we use it to open another box and find a child's toy. With the toy, we have to go around showing it to random mourning mothers asking if this is their child's toy. When we show it to the right woman, she begins remembering the night of the kidnapping, and we see in her mind a mysterious red-clad figure as well as the boy in the apartments. We go and confront him, and sure enough, he's the one behind the kidnappings. After we defeat him in battle, he has a change of heart and tells us that the kids are in the sewers and that he regrets what he's done. See, he actually used to live in the slums, but was forced into hiding after serious abuse and mistreatment due to being a mind user. People in this world are very fearful of mind users, and by extension the church, since they use minds to keep their power. His sad backstory is interrupted when all of a sudden, the slums are being evacuated because the Carla cult has begun a full-blown assault on the place. We, however, take this time to investigate that room with the person who just kept repeating, "I don't know anything," over and over again. Inside, we find them dead and the assailant still in the process of trying to escape. Apparently, this resident was an informant that this guy was trying to take out before they could potentially leak any information, which I don't know, I feel like that's a little unnecessary, but alright. We defeat that guy and we report our findings to Toko. She looks around for the church's sewer key, but isn't able to find it. Reason being, we actually found it in the informant's room, basically confirming that someone within the church is working with the cult. We head into the sewers and find Priest Seth, who stands before the two corpses of priests that have seemingly imploded. Wait, how did he get in here if I have the key? Seth tells us that he's investigating a mysterious drug that is essentially distilled memories that are so powerful a person's body literally transforms in an attempt to match the memories, resulting either in serious disfigurement or death. So Togo places him under arrest and takes him into custody because, he's suspicious as hell, while we continue exploring the sewers. Except that Toko sends us a little mind text message thing and is like, "Girl, Seth escaped, and also he's like an ogre now." Like, what? So we have to flush him out of the sewer vents because apparently he's scuttled in there. And then we receive a mind text message from Ayla with an attached FMV file. And apparently she's being attacked by a monstrous Seth. Don't worry, she's totally fine. But when we meet up with her, she does have us fight Seth for her because she's simply too in love with him to do it herself. We defeat Seth, who by this point is entirely deranged, and do what is only natural in this situation, which is loot his corpse. On him, we find kind of a floppy disk, and when we head back to the informant's room, we are able to use it on a laptop and learn via this email that Boys was behind this entire thing. So we head back to the monastery and report everything and are granted express permission to dive into Boys, which under normal circumstances, diving into a priest would be illegal. Mid-dive, however, Boys bites off his own tongue so that he'll be too overcome with pain to properly think and won't spill all the tea. Well, before he did that, we were able to glean that there's a storehouse in the sewer for some reason, and that the key is stored in his garden. So with the key, we unlock the storehouse and confront the leader of the Carla cult. Awesome design, by the way, but ultimately we don't find any of the missing children. This is still considered us completing our mission for some reason, and we are granted a quick audience with the Pope, who congratulates us on all that we've done. So we go to have our iconic 7 p.m. nap in our room until we receive an email from a mysterious individual named Raven, who tells us that he awaits us at the lumber house bar thing. Sensing no danger from this, we head over and meet Raven, who shockingly overpowers us in a mind battle and begins filling our mind with strange memories before we pass out. Okay, time is skipped a little, and Allure is now stationed in South, waiting to meet with Ayla. She's still shaken up by the encounter with Raven, but there's honestly not much we can do about it since he disappeared right after. We meet up with Ayla in the missionary outpost. She's gathered some information on the purchase and sales of memories taking place in South, which, if you remember, is what Seth was investigating before his death. Unfortunately, Archbishop Lowen isn't willing to send us any more backup, so it's just us for now. Ayla suspects that the drug in question, DeSpiria, is connected to one of the powerful families here in South. Ayla leaves to investigate on her own, and oh, holy shit. Oh my god, alright. Despite looking like the final boss, this guy is Reverend Martin, and he's pretty unimportant aside from being in charge of this missionary outpost. Anyway, Ayla goes off to investigate on her own. Allure does the same. So, remember how I said DeSpiria is hard to properly retell? Well, this chapter is easily the worst offender of this. It was so hard to A, put the story together in my little brain, B, parse through the side stuff that doesn't really matter, and then C, find a way to retell this chapter in a way that made any sense at all. Like, you may have been following the plot while being slightly confused, but from here on, it's just gonna go off the rails. And if you've already watched Rio's playthrough, or you rewatch this after seeing it, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, no, he literally like said step by step what happened, and it just straight up makes no sense. One of the first characters we run into is Paloma, one of a trio of robot sisters. While other androids we meet are hostile because they have minds, these girls are all programming, so they're perfectly harmless. Paloma thinks these things called Saint Dolls are super cute, and we can get one from this guy, and if we dive into his mind, he first received the Saint Doll from this lady. Keep her in mind. While we explore, we also meet her sister Beth, who runs the Fukunishi store, which is basically a convenience store you can stock up on consumables with. Another character we meet is Billy. Now, Billy is a bit of a weird character. He's the leader of a mafia gang, but is actually really kind and treats his underlings like they're his younger siblings. Billy is also looking into DeSpiria, although he doesn't really have much of a motive to do so. It might be because his family used to be the bigwigs of South before being dethroned by the Tao family, which have a connection to DeSpiria. Also, if you remember, Reina was associated with this family. He's also the friend of a local priest, Lucien. The two of them used to be gangsters together until Lucien suddenly gave up his life of crime to join the priesthood, seemingly out of nowhere. Another character talked about pretty often is Father Faucet, who is another priest and is openly pro-Spiria, but is pretty popular with the general public. And I can't even begin to imagine why that might be. Anyway, to progress the plot, we head over to this dump area where a police officer is watching two men clean things up. These guys seem to be pretty harmless because they have undergone a quote-unquote mind castration, but apparently they're part of a gang. While we root around in the trash a little, we find our very own Saint Doll, which is apparently the calling card of their rival gang, the Illusory Dawn. Now that we have the Saint Doll, we gain access to the Tao Fan Row, a high-profile restaurant. Diving into some of these patrons, a lot of them seem to be coming here for their fix of Spiria, and the dealer is apparently the same lady giving out Saint Dolls. But some of the patrons also think of this guy. Now, I'm not sure why he does this, but we actually catch this guy, who we later learn is named Johnny, releasing a monster on these lobotomy victims picking up trash. So after we defeat it, we chase after him back to the Tao Fan Row and try to read his mind, but he's able to sense us doing so and flees. We try to follow him, but it seems the owner of this place is protecting him, so we head back to the mission outpost to report our findings so that way we can start an official investigation. We get a pass that will allow us into an adjacent sector called Midian, so we can try to hunt down Johnny. This half of South has an entire other outpost, which is also where the aforementioned Lucien is. We can head over to Midian's mission outpost, where we run into that alleged Spiria dealer who is named, and I shit you not, Main Valorant. Who do you guys main in Valorant? I play Viper. Now obviously, we read this drug dealer's mind, and she's basically thinking to herself, quit digging or you're gonna get hurt. So she's thinking these threats to herself so that way when we read her mind, we'll hear them. Apparently, this woman is here to heal Lucien, who is suffering from some vaguely defined affliction. As we explore, we run into Ayla, who has had a bit of a breakthrough in her investigation, and she and a couple of handmaidens are planning to intercept a Spiria trade. We'll leave her to that as we continue looking into Johnny. We run into Beth, who laments the fact that while she was out taking a break, a thief came by and ransacked her store. Later on, we see her being scolded by the final android sister, Maria, who has Beth look after and stay with me on this, coma patient being stored in a shed while Maria goes to fix up the store. As we continue wandering around, we enter a brothel, and if we dive into the owner, she is apparently the girlfriend of Johnny, and he's hiding here. So we defeat her, and then we find Johnny and defeat him, and as he dies, he tells us that the church is entirely complacent in the sale of Spiria. Well, with our investigation kind of hitting a dead end, albeit one with a bombshell at the end, we head back to the Handmaiden's hideout to reconvene with Ayla, only to find her and her entire squadron completely annihilated. Someone leaked the sting operation, and a bunch of these guys came by with mind-suppressing headsets and killed all the maidens, including Ayla, rest in peace. Now buckle up for this. We head to Reverend Martin to tell him that a bunch of handmaidens have been brutally slaughtered, and this idiot goes, Allure, I got this funny prank message from someone saying they're going to raid the handmaidens HQ and kill them all. What a jokester. This guy literally got a letter that said that these people are about to commit an act of domestic terror, and ignored it? So this obviously gets reported to the higher-ups, and the church sends us reinforcements, but it doesn't really matter because Laura does everything by herself anyway. Back at the Midian outpost, Main Valorant is leaving in a huff because Lucian wouldn't accept her form of treatment, which by the way was Spiria. Like, imagine going to a priest with dementia and offering them a brick of heroin as the cure. Oh, also, this is what Lucian looks like. I had thought he was Reverend Martin when I first met him, but no, he's just the third priest in this game with long dark hair. He tells us that the disease he has and what he's going through is the fate of all mind users, which, does not bode well for lore. So we take like a single step outside, and all of a sudden, Lucian has gone off the deep end and is running around, spilling all the tea that the church is involved with the Spiria trade. We chase after him, and he slips away, but we run into Beth, who has once again messed up and has let the coma patient go into a seizure. We head in there, and Maria offers to find the Spiria traders if we use our mind powers to stabilize this lady, who is named Lisa, by the way. This whole plot point is really confusing. Basically, she was saved by someone, and they died, and so she feels guilty, and she's in like a self-induced coma. I don't know, it doesn't matter. After we do that, we find Maria, who is not looking too hot, and she directs us to this factory building where the Spiria traders are. It is never explained how she knew this or what happened here, but, suspend your disbelief. We head inside to find Billy and Main Valorant, whose name is still hilarious, by the way, but they just kind of walk away while Allure has to deal with an assassin. We also run into Father Fouchet, who is immediately shot by Billy, who I forgot to mention has the magical ability to manifest a loaded firearm inexplicably. That's just a power this guy has, disconnected from minds, I guess. Well, Main Valorant is surrounded and taken into custody, while Allure learns from Chani, remember her, that we can get more information about the Spiria trade in a place called Amagasaki Breakdown. And then she forsakes being a maiden and flees. So, bye Chani. Meanwhile, Lucian is being taken into church custody, probably to be lobotomized, and Billy is going on a gay little rampage for his boyfriend. And at first, Allure goes to confront him, but seeing all the corruption in the church, she's like, you know what, do whatever you want. And she goes to Amagasaki to see what she can learn there. Okay, moving on, we arrive at Amagasaki, which is honestly a dump, and the first person we dive into is thinking about Spiria and this prolific dealer of it in this town named Clemens. As we look around, we come across a mother looking for her son who's disappeared, a shopkeeper who mentions a curse cast by undead and missing children, and the entrance to a recycling factory which exudes horrific thoughts of children pleading for their lives. So, that's ominous. Additionally, as we explore, we see all sorts of ghostly figures which are like the projection of these kids' minds. We run into one of them named Joachim, who speaks very cryptically but is basically asking for help and hints that we can progress further by somehow interacting with the owner of a bar. But the bar is blocked by a bouncer robot who will instantly kill us if we try to get in. We run into Clemens in a side alley, and he gives us a vial of Spiria on the house, how kind, except that we were reading his mind this whole time, and this disgusting pervert gave us a nearly lethal dose that'll leave us in a coma, and then he plans to assault us. So instead of taking it ourselves, we give it to one of the addicts on the street, and when we go back to Clemens, he's really impressed that we're still standing, and invites us to his secret hideout, and we agree to go with him. While we're here, Clemens injects Allure with Spiria, and surprise, surprise, a new consciousness with a mind tries to invade Allure. We fight off the Spiria as well as an underling of Clemens named Boreas. Rio says that they think this character is a racist depiction of the main character from The Green Mile. I've never seen that movie, but I thought it was an important thing to bring up, and either way, this character is really dehumanized in a gross way through a lot of the dialogue in the game. We read Clemens' mind and learn that he, along with the female bar owner that Joachim told us about, and the owner of a brothel, are all involved in trafficking children to the local recycling plant. We confront the brothel owner, and after we defeat him, he comes clean and gives us an access card that will let us into the female owner's bar. We go to head inside, but at that very moment, two scary-looking guys named Elric and Jade bump into us. They let us go, but they mention they're on the lookout for an extremely powerful mind user, which is probably us. Thank God this futuristic world doesn't have wanted posters or pictures. So while we're inside of that bar, we try to look into one of the back rooms, and the owner's like, oh, please don't do that. So Allure goes into the bathroom and is like, man, what am I gonna do? There's definitely something in there. And for no reason at all, the owner barges in and starts a mind battle with us, which we win. And so now we're able to just go in there. As we head in to investigate, another child projects themselves and basically gives Allure a trigger warning that what we're gonna see is super disturbing, and they are correct, so be warned. Inside, this place radiates with the thoughts of children as they beg for help, and the owner we just defeated laughs and torments them. There's blood everywhere, and as we explore, we find a secret staircase and descend. I'm just going to reiterate that there's a lot of child endangerment and abuse and experimentation and stuff, so if you're sensitive, maybe skip over this chapter. As we explore this area, we run into the mind ghosts of various children, and each of them have actually been mentioned before by NPCs prior to this mission. He asks us to head to the central command block, so we do, but on the way we start overhearing a conversation and listen in. It's Jade and Elric, as well as a third guy named Malcolm, and the three of them are talking to a guy named Doc. Basically, they're just talking about how evil they are and how they're going to kill Allure, before realizing that Allure is actually there listening in. Now, despite Allure saying that we need to run away, to progress we actually head back in there and run into Elric, who we fight and defeat. As he dies, he tells us that we have to go fight the other two to get their cube so we can unlock a security door, so we go and do that. If you're wondering who these guys are and what their motivations are, they don't really have any. They're just agents hired from New Tokyo. That said, we do find out why they experiment specifically on children. Basically, when injected with Despiria that has been harvested from an adult, the Despiria obtained after that from the children is of higher quality. So we kill the agents until we get to Malcolm, who, after we defeat him, does this weird mind blast thing that doesn't kill us, but forces Allure to feel all the pain and anguish that the kids had felt. We continue deeper into the facility and come across these gross bug things, and it seems that these creatures are some of the children, and that after their bodies had transformed due to the Despiria, they were left in cells to rot. We also find an email that confirms that Seth was totally innocent, and that he had begun investigating Despiria, only to be targeted and killed by the church. Due to Malcolm's mind blast, the remaining children whose minds have been kept here are now vulnerable, and they ask us to kill them to set them free. One of the saddest things is that when we're fighting one of them, we go into the kids' holding room, and we find that they had made a stuffed animal out of the scraps of cloth probably obtained from their deceased friends. We finally enter the innermost part of the factory and come face to face with Vi Rutherford. He reveals himself as the enigmatic Doc that the three guys were talking to earlier. He didn't manage to survive our last encounter, but somehow he was able to reanimate himself, just like he did Violet. He also gives us a bit of an explanation in regards to the church's motivation in all of this. Basically, they want to make Despiria from an extremely devoted person, and then spread that around so that everyone would become religious, but he doesn't tell us his motives. We once again defeat Vi, but we know that he'll be back again. And as we go to leave, now without any leads, we run into Raven. Raven tells Allure to go to Eden, the land of the heretics, and look for a man named Lazarus, which she decides to do. As she heads to Eden, the church sends out this whole citywide announcement that basically Allure needs to be hunted down, but preferably brought back alive. So here we are. Stop. Are those cornrows growing into his nose, or are those nose hair cornrows? I gotta know. Anyway, here we are in the land of heresy. Does that say Hershey's? I see why this place is a condemned land. They do the worst trope in all of JRPG history twice in this very town, the Lordom. As we explore around, there are a couple of places that are of importance. First is the Clinic of No Return, which shockingly emanates a crushing atmosphere. Next is the Tower of Rebirth, which we get turned away from because we're not allowed in without express permission. And finally is a bar/strip club that... Okay, who wrote this? Has a mecha girl named Elijah who is constantly sobbing, and somehow these cries are pleasing to the patrons. As we continue exploring, we run into that ugly kid and his ugly sister who tell us that Lowen is offering us safe passage back to Central. We can accept this, but that'll lead us to a bad ending where Allure is either lobotomized or gets used for Speria production. If we refuse, we continue with the game, and the two of them are ready to fight us until Dr. Prospero, chief engineer at the Tower of Rebirth, kind of just tells them to knock it off and they leave. Prospero invites us to the Tower of Rebirth for a hydrogen bomb's worth of lore. During World War III, all sorts of terrible chemical and bioweapons were used that nearly wiped out humanity. A side effect that afflicted the survivors was that the children born after this no longer had emotions or the will to live. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a man calling himself the Engineer of Life appeared and began working with scientists to develop a new life form that would sustain itself on memories and produce emotions as their waste. These life forms, dubbed minds, were implanted into children's brains, and instantaneously they began to feel emotions and wanted to live. The ones who had developed the minds began to be referred to as the Church, and naturally they began to have more influence on society. Meanwhile, the Engineer of Life, Lazarus, just all of a sudden is like, well, I'm out, and he takes his daughter named Menno and goes into the Clinic of No Return and then never returns. Well, with that, we continue exploring and we go into the bar, and this little rat bastard named Eugene really struggles because he has a mind power, whatever, tears out Elijah's vocal cords. So we meet Randolph, who is the owner of this bar, and he's super protective of Elijah and agrees to speak with us after we get Elijah's vocal cords back. We go ahead and do that, don't worry about it, it's a fetch quest, and Randolph gives us his lore. He was the boyfriend of Lazarus's daughter, Menno. Randolph would visit the two until one day, Lazarus locked the door to the clinic. Sometime after, Menno's screams started echoing throughout the entire town, and people began to sort of be beckoned to the clinic, which had also reopened, by the way. People who would enter would never be seen again, and so Elijah was created, and her cries are essentially the opposite of Menno's cries, and sort of act as a counterforce to the strange energy pulling people to the clinic. We go tell Prospero that now we know everything, and for some reason he's like, okay, you can go into the clinic now, but just so you know, by the way, the last guy who went in there, named Raven, got turned into a mind, so be careful. On our way to the clinic, we are intercepted by none other than Toko, who realized that she killed both Seth and Ayla, as well as forced Boys to bite off his own tongue. This whole time, she was working for the Church, fully aware of their shady dealings. And I'm gonna be honest, this totally shocked me. Anyway, we kill her. So finally, we head inside the clinic, and Raven sacrifices himself to offer Allure greater protection against the thought waves within the clinic. Don't care. This place is like a boss rush, except that we actually get time in between each fight to recover, and also despite the clinic's name, we are free to leave at any time. Allure also mentions that she recognizes some of the thoughts here, and apparently anyone we fought, anyone who's died, all of their thoughts are being gathered here in the clinic. As we explore throughout the clinic and fight bosses, we learn through these pseudo-flashbacks that Vi is here, and he has forced Menno to be this sort of beacon that calls people to the clinic through this big reactor thing called Agate. And because of the sheer volume of people, everyone here is suffering and fusing together, and all the while Menno is in intense pain. We fight and defeat Menno, granting her the death that she had long wished for, and finally enter the last area of the game and meet Vi face to face, who reveals himself as none other than Lazarus. His motivation this whole time has been to grant people eternal life, which honestly isn't a horrible goal, but the way that he's going about it just isn't right. Firstly, his method is to implant minds into robots, and we've seen how that goes. Not to mention, severe human abuse has to occur to make these plans work, and in the end result, it's totally not worth it. That doesn't even mention the fact that what he's really doing is putting the original consciousness through horrendous, unending torture, and just making copies of it to redistribute to robots. Allure faces off and defeats Vi/Lazarus as the clinic begins to crumble. Allure is never seen again, but we see some of the characters we've met living their lives as normal, and learn that the children born after this no longer need minds, and that the Church has since shut down, likely because they can no longer produce Speria. The game ends with Allure saying that if the world is truly made up of people's thoughts, then she has touched enough people's minds to live on after death. Now that we've gone over everything piece by piece, let's put it all together into a single, cohesive summary that will hopefully make sense. After World War III, Children began to be born without emotion, and so a new life form, minds, were created as symbiotic parasites to feed on memories and allow the brain to produce emotions again. Those who created the minds naturally rose to power and were dubbed the Church. Seeking to maintain their power, the Church began investigating ways to instill people's memories and emotions into other people, and discovered Spiria, which could be obtained by overloading a person's brain with memories and minds. To get higher quality Spiria, they began using children, basically as filters to distill the Spiria. The death rate that this had, however, meant that they would need to continuously kidnap children from the slums, and the sheer number of missing children caused outrage, and the Church was forced to have their lower-ranking church members look into the kidnappings. Unfortunately for them, many of these investigators, like Seth, Ayla, and even Lucian, began to actually uncover the truth and would need to be silenced. All while this is happening, Lazarus, under the name Vi Rutherford, begins posing as an engineer at an android company to begin his experiments to grant humanity eternal life by placing their consciousness in robots. This, of course, has the adverse side effect of not working and causing the robot-people hybrids to go wild and kill anyone in sight. On a pretty run-of-the-mill mission, Allure sees this firsthand when she just so happens to be on a train with Vi, and naturally, it's this mission that kicks off the rest of the game. So long story short, was this game truly about a telepathic nun investigating how a series of child kidnappings and an underground drug trade are connected? Well, yes. Here's my one and only question that I genuinely don't have an answer for. Why is Vi kingpinning the Spiria trade? Like, what does distributing Spiria actually do for him, and how does it further his goals at all? So as you can see, DeSpiria's story gets a bit muddled in the end. That said, a lot of it was likely lost in translation or the way I compacted the story, but either way, the story isn't really what makes the game great. The sprawling environments we explore are super memorable, and the world building that went into the game's settings really shines, since this whole game feels like another world, but also maintains a vague sense of familiarity. Easily the biggest draw into DeSpiria's world is the wacky characters that inhabit it, even if they weren't mentioned in my story review. My absolute favorite character would definitely be Allure, however. She's such a unique protagonist, and a really interesting take on the silent protagonist trope. It's left up in the air as to whether or not she's mute and communicates telepathically or not, but even if she isn't, we really do get to see the world through her lens, filtered by her internal monologue. She really rides the line between being cold and calculating and being a genuinely empathetic person, and I think that we see her defrost more and more over the course of the game. It's nice to see such an old game have a strong female protagonist that doesn't fall into the typical modern tropes of being strong by being without emotion. Also, her thoughts are really poetic, and she has a lot of good lines, even if she just thinks them to herself and no one else ever hears her prose. Something else interesting about her is that she may or may not be a lesbian. There isn't much in the way of proof, but she clearly isn't interested in men, and diving into that muscle hunk poster actually causes her psychological damage. Also, when she's at the brothel, I think she literally has sex with the owner so good that they let her come by for free anytime. As for critiques, her past is a bit too enigmatic for me. I'd love to know more about her time in the church and her rise to power. It's also mentioned that she spent some time in an orphanage, so I'd like to know a bit about that. Something I felt was really missing was a faith struggle, and generally, the church is pretty ill-defined as a religious organization. Like, they're clearly Christian-themed, but does it go beyond that? Do they believe in the God of the Bible, or has it changed? Is it a new religion? Throughout the entire game, Allure mentions her personal feelings on the religion pretty infrequently, and I'd love to see the push and pull of her faith as she continues to find how the church is in fact a corrupt organization. Overall, she was a really awesome protagonist, and the end with her more than likely dying is really sad because I genuinely liked her a lot. Also, of course, I have to reiterate how cool the mind system is. Certain games have such strong gameplay mechanics that they've literally spawned their own subgenres like Souls-likes and Metroidvanias. But Shin Megami Tensei's fusion mechanic seems mostly unique, and it's nice to see it explored by another game. Overall, I really like DeSpiria, and I hope that this video can serve as a piece in demystifying it a little bit to Western audiences. Once again, a huge thank you to Popomoko, also known as Rio, as they were so helpful in clearing up some of my questions I had about the game, and they really are like the Rosetta Stone for understanding this game as an English speaker. I hope to see you all in my next video, and even if I don't, thank you so much for watching.